It's honestly difficult to remember a week where the political landscape has shifted as dramatically as it has this week and on so many different fronts. In fact, it's still shifting as we record this podcast. Labor, of course, won a crushing victory on Saturday night, and the victorious PM has been walking on air since then. As we record this, he's assembling his huge caucus for their first post-election victory meeting. But that's been promptly followed, of course, by a factional fight over the last few days over frontbench positions, which has left the only Muslim cabinet minister, Ed Husic, and the only Jewish cabinet minister, Mark Dreyfus, shown the door. The Greens have lost their leader, Adam Bant, who failed to win his seat, along with others in the lower house. They're going to be lucky to hold on to just one. It's unclear who will emerge as the new Greens leader and what direction the party will now go in. And then there's the Liberals, who lost their leader, Peter Dutton, and face what some are calling an existential crisis. The Liberals need not only a new leader, but to find a way to appeal to young voters and women in particular. Oh, and Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price has jumped ship from the Nats to the Libs in a move that stunned and upset her former colleagues in the Nationals and a few of her new ones in the Liberals as well. So I'm keen this week to focus on the Liberal Party in particular. What direction will it now go in? And will it end up just being a divided mess, whoever becomes the leader? I'm David Spears on Ngunnawal Country at Parliament House in Canberra. Welcome to Insiders on Background. Well, Fiona Scott is a federal vice president of the Liberal Party and a former member for Lindsay in Sydney's Outer West. Fiona Scott, welcome to you. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
No, look, a real pleasure. It's nearly a week on from this rather extraordinary election result. With that passage of time, is it any clearer to you, for starters, what went wrong for the Liberal Party?
Yeah, look, I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not think the Australian public sent us a pretty resounding message. And I think the opportunity out of that is to actually revisit everything. And I found myself over the last few days reading the foundation documents of the party, things like the We Believe statement, which is, it's on the federal website, it's a public document, it has its history back in the Menzies era.
And
And
does it still resonate now? I mean, does it...
I think it's fantastic. I think it's amazing.
So for those who haven't read it, what are some of the key points in terms of... I mean, this goes to what does the Liberal Party stand for today?
Yeah, so to answer your question, it's the Liberal Party, did we answer these questions and does the Australian public believe this is the Liberal Party? We believe in Australia, its people and its future, in the innate worth of the individual, in the right to be independent, to own property. It's a pretty big issue right now, and to achieve, and in the need to encourage initiative and personal responsibility. Did the people of southwestern Sydney believe this next point? In the basic freedoms of thought, worship, speech, association and choice. Were we really that open? In the equality of opportunity was with Australians having the opportunity to reach their full potential in a tolerant national community. We've had a very divisive couple of years, David, and does Australians believe that the Liberal Party stands for that? In a just and humane society where those who cannot provide them for themselves can live in dignity. Like, they're the first few bullet points. I'm not going to go on and
Sure, but there's some powerful points. Is it your view that at the election just gone, the Liberal Party did not espouse some of those values?
I think it's deeper than that. I think, robo-debt. Is robo-debt something that, that first point, in a humane society where those who cannot provide for themselves can live in dignity? Did we manage that properly? I think there's a lot of questions that if we're really honest with ourselves and where our brand is, are we truly embodying what is something that every member of the Liberal Party believes in, which is these statements? I mean, how many people would even know that these are the principles and the beliefs of the Liberal Party? Could you vox pop that down the street in Monica there in Canberra and read those points out and say, okay, I'm not going to tell you which political party this is. I want you to tell me which political party in Australia believes this. How many would go, yes, that's the Liberal Party? If you walk down the street in Western Sydney and said, what iconic Australian brand has been known for its safety record, 90% of Australians would go, oh, Qantas. You don't have to necessarily say the name of the brand to know what they stand for. And I think when I look at this election, what policies did we have that aligned with those visions? What is the behaviours of our party? What are our actions that align with these visions? And when you look at something like this, and I look at the win in 2013, those words of hope for the future, reward for hard work, opportunity for all, hope, reward, and opportunity. I'm sure 2013 is etched in lots of people's
Yeah.
minds, but they were lifted out of this document. We provided a vision for the Australian public, and they they wanted that vision. And for me, I think this document is incredibly powerful. But I'm not sure that as a party, if we're honest with ourselves, that we are embodying these values.
I mean, some have pointed out, I've seen Chris Pine and others making points this week that what the Liberal Party did stand for looked more like division, looked more like the mean party. How,
Yeah,
yeah, would you agree with that?
yeah, I would. I I like the statement I read at the beginning of this podcast, David,
Mm.
and I even brought up the example of robo-debt. There's a lot of those things that I don't think we are being our best selves, and I don't think our party is demonstrating that or providing vision to the Australian public. And it
Yeah,
and it starts with going back to basics. It starts with these sorts of foundation documents and moving forward and being honest with ourselves.
many have made the point that the Liberals are losing young voters and women. I think you've been
Yeah.
making the point this week too about multicultural Australians as well.
Mm.
What's your point there?
Well, you look at, say, a seat that everyone was talking about for a while, a seat like Werriwa.
Mm.
I even like to look at a seat like Fowler with Dai Lee, who was once a member of the Liberal Party. And I've always thought the values of the Liberal Party, I mean, from Western Sydney myself, had actually aligned more with, the Vietnamese community that were living in the southwest part of Sydney. Why haven't they voted with us? Well, why haven't we been able to win those seats? Why have those people not seen themselves in us when
Why do you think? I
they
mean, why do you think? Is it the sort of we're going to crack down on immigration? Is it as simple as that?
No, I think it's much deeper than that, David.
Mm.
I think it's we live in a representative democracy, and I'm not sure that we seem representative of the people we want to represent. I'm not sure that the Lebanese Islamic communities living in Werriwa see themselves in us, and vice versa, even though our candidate was, a man who was Islamic Lebanese himself. So I think but they would see themselves in these types of values. And if we're truthful to these values, then for me, it does come back to connecting again with women, connecting again or connecting with multicultural communities, connecting with young people. I think who we're connecting with in the community is more than just women. I think it's a much broader issue, and it's about how we again become representative of Australian people and provide a vision for the delivery of what we collectively as a country want to see Australia become.
Well, what you're talking about there is the sort of people the Liberal Party pre-selects, and there's been a long debate about how to get more women pre-selected in particular, let alone people from different ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
Where do you stand though on the idea of targets? They've been in place for a while. They keep being missed, but making the step to quotas, which Labor adopted years ago, and they've worked. Where do you stand on that?
I'm not sure it's the answer. I appreciate the reasons for it, and I also appreciate the hypocrisy in that response being quite simply that, of course, there's quotas within cabinets and everything else that uphill and down dale. So I appreciate that. Um, Katie Mullins, terrific candidate in Parramatta. She had a 10-point swing against a Lucy Wicks in Robertson, quite significant swing against a Joe Vanderplat. Incredibly talented woman who ran in Eda Monero. If you looked at any of the polling at different points, Roberts and Eda Monero potentially were in play at certain points if any of the polling was accurate. Um, so there were some pretty talented women that were pre-selected this time around. I mean, you look at Giselle, who's, as
In
we,
Bradfield, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, obviously that's going down to the wire there with, scrutineering and all hands on deck for that one. You look at Amelia Harmer in Victoria, there was actually some pretty fantastic female
So are you
candidates.
saying it's more about the policy offering that saw the swings against the Liberals and didn't allow all of those pre-selected Liberal candidates to actually win?
I think it starts with the policy offering. I think
Mm.
first it starts with the policy offering. I mean, and I think the Liberal Party really does need to put everything on the table, review the lot, except for maybe the "we believe" statement. I think that's the
Mm.
unifying piece. Um, and we have to build forward from there. If the net result at the end is sure you go for quotas, but I'd hate to have quotas on women, which then meant that we weren't connecting with, the vast array of multicultural peoples across our
Mm.
country.
So it should be looked at, but you're not wedded to the idea.
I'm not wedded to the idea. I don't think it's the silver bullet that fixes a problem, though. I
Yeah.
think it's much deeper than that.
I mean, on the policy front, I think you've said the work from home policy sent a cold shiver down your spine, and clearly it did for many women and was dumped.
Yeah.
But, are there others you would point to and say, clearly they were a problem?
Well, I door knocked a lot of houses to win my seat in Western Sydney in the day. And what I found when you door knock and you meet the public, people overwhelmingly will vote what's going to be the best opportunity or the best option for them and their families and align with their own values. Um, we aren't actually a mean people, Australians. We actually are very gregarious and we actually want the best for everyone. I think when your policy is you're going to sack 41,000 people, um, you don't win votes by telling someone you're going to sack 41,000 people that live next door. I'm going to sack 41,000 people in Canberra. I don't think you win votes with that sort of stuff. I think you entrench a view that you're just mean. And I think there's a whole range of those pieces when you look at the work from home issue. The work from home issue, when it was then doubled down, oh, but it's just for the APS. Well, okay, who is the APS? Do you know what the APS is? Okay, the APS is the Australian Public Service. It's still a very jargony type of term. If you
Mm.
work in our jobs, you know what it is. If you live in the Canberra, you know what it is. But when it's then described, well, it's the Canberra bureaucrats, the Canberra public servants. It's what, well, I get that, and this is the view of voters or the Australian public, was then to say, well, but everything happens to the public service first. The unions will negotiate EBAs with the public service first, and then it bleeds through the entire community. Um, and when you're in a cost of living crisis and living somewhere like a Western Sydney where you need two cars and then you've got tolls and then you've got petrol prices. And so if I'm not working from home, then it's going to cost this, this, and this. And then I've got to get back to childcare for 6 o'clock. And oh my God, you just don't understand me. Goodbye. And
Mm.
the comment, yes, but we're only talking about the public service. And it's like, yeah, but you guys do it to your workforce and my boss is going to do it for me. So that doesn't chop it, mate. And
Mm. Mm.
that was the instant disconnect. They were the voting public was prepared to look at the coalition at that point, but it was just, you know, you don't get it.
I mean,
Sorry.
it raises a lot of questions around how that was put forward in the first place, the process of coming up with
Yeah.
policies, testing policies to make sure they're not going to have that dramatic effect of turning voters away, as you say. I want to ask you about personnel and also organisationally in the Liberal Party. Personnel, as we record this, the leadership debate is on between Susan Lee and Angus Taylor. Susan Lee has this morning declared her candidacy. She says, it would send a strong message to women to have a female leader. Do you agree? And should it be Susan Lee?
Um, I feel really, I mean, I'm not trying to skip your answer there, but I actually feel a little bit torn by it all because I just feel we need change, and I'm not sure. Look, I think female leadership would be great, but we don't need female leadership for the sake of leadership.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Can either
I
of them
think
deliver change? The change you're talking about, one was deputy leader, one was shadow treasurer.
I'm not 100% sure, and I don't know. I don't know, and hence, that will be a debate, a question for the party
Mm.
room. Um, I believe they possibly can, but they need to be genuine. I don't think we need someone that's going to be night watchman for the party. We need someone that's going to actually get in there and dig into our systems and dig into how our CRM systems work and campaign platforms and protocols and how we communicate with our candidates, how we pre-select our candidates, how the secretariats work amongst each other, how we buy media, what media we do, and right through how you align policy back to these documents. And for me, that's what I want to hear from the people who want to be leaders.
Mm.
I'm open to all. I don't have firm opinions one way or another on those things, except for who is going to be genuinely out there to listen to the message the Australian public delivered our party, and actually, rather than wallow in that, take the opportunity of the blank canvas it provides for us to
Mm.
rebuild and to take what I think are timeless values and use the Liberal Party as a machine to deliver those values and those visions for the Australian public. And
Well, I'll tell you someone else who would represent change is Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price coming into the Liberal Party room. It's certainly upset a few on the Nat side that she's decided to shift which party room she sits with, and there's some talk about maybe running as deputy leader. But is this the sort of change? I mean, Jacinta Price, well known for opposing The Voice, but also taken prominent positions on things like abortion and school curriculum and so on. Is that the sort of change that gets back to the values you're talking about?
maybe that might be the answer. But I don't think we need to come across as, I think we need to come across that we are embodying these set of values. We don't need to bring Trump style politics into Australia. We have a very different system. We have a compulsory voting system that actually means we must govern to the centre and govern for all Australians. Now, obviously, the Voice was categorically defeated, in a popular vote. But we also need to make sure that our leaders can talk about the economics. They can talk about how we actually build our country up. And, the voice, yes, that has been heard. But at the same token, there is a lot of healing to do from that process. And, how we then bring Aboriginal Australia as well as, all of our multicultural communities, the whole country together is going to be really important. And the people who are putting themselves up for leadership, whether it's Jacinta, I highly respect Jacinta. I think she's amazing. I highly respect Angus. I highly respect Susan. I think they're wonderful people. Likewise, Dan Tian's name, who's been in the mix as well. Um, I just want to see them actually come back to these sorts of values. And I'm sorry, I'm sounding like a broken record
No,
on it.
that's understandable. What about organisationally? You're a vice president, so maybe you're restrained in what you can say here. But some have said to me there needs to be a look at the president, John Olsen, as well, after two record election defeats like this. Would you weigh in on that? Does the party need to look at its organisational leadership too?
I think we have to look at a lot of it. I think up top to bottom, bottom to top, David, I think everything should be on the table. Everything but the statement I read to you. I think everything should be on the table. I think our CRM systems should be on the table. Polling should be on the table. The way we advertise, the way we communicate, who the leaders of our parliamentary party should be on the table, how we communicate, what wish list items we might do in local areas. Likewise, the executive of our states and our local areas. Is it right to still have an intervention in New South Wales right now? Does the federal system, with the way things have gone in other areas, was that the best thing for this election to have New South Wales intervened on? Is now the time to talk about pre-selection processes and all of those sorts of things? I actually think we need to actually strip it back further past all of that point. I think we need to say back to even, and I hate being a liberal that sits here and quotes Menzies, which I've done nonstop to you this morning, but I think we actually have to sit back and say, what is it that we agree with? What do we agree with? Where do we meet? What is this point? And what is still relevant, all of this stuff?
And how do you do this
And then
process? I mean, is it who does this? How do you? This is a broad scope of reviewing you're
the
talking
job
about.
for David Spears. It sounds like a great job for David Spears.
Don't start that.
There you go. Like
No, thank you.
I've seen you host debates. You're great
Well,
at it.
they're fun, but this doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Do you need someone independent, or is it like a former, premier, like a Gladys Berejiklian, or who? Does it need to be someone with completely clean hands looking at this?
Well, I don't think there's any liberal with clean hands because everyone's going to have a stake in the pie
Yeah.
somewhere. But you're right. I think it should be someone that can bring people together. I mean, whether it's, you bring somebody on who's conceived the left and somebody on the right, maybe you bring in somebody like a Gladys on one side, but then, more conservative parts of the party may not warm to Gladys and think that she's there for one interest. But Um, but she's actually a great suggestion of somebody that would be, you know, a great choice for something like that. But I think that's probably what we need to do is to really look at all of those things. Um, and I think you know, after 10 years in government, I think the beauty of the Westminster system is and not having um, fixed stakes in the ground, like, the Americans being stuck on things like, the right to bear arms sitting in their Bill of Rights, for instance. It is the ability that a Westminster system allows a government to ebb and change and be molded by the generation that is holding the levers. And our political parties need to do that too. They shouldn't be static. They they should be transitioned from generation to generation. And I think this is a time that I look at my generation, in my 40s, that we take the reins off, the Howard era generation. We then evolve the party into the modern day and then prepare to hand it over to the younger generation coming through. And that is a process that's hard. Some people are going to have to take their hands off the steering wheels when they've had them there for a long time. But it's needs to be done, not in a factional sense. It needs to be done in a way that the party evolves and it becomes relevant to the people we hope to represent. And for me, the answer of this election was that, you know, the vast proportions of Australians did not see us people that represented them. And that's why we need to really go back to the drawing board.
No, it's really interesting what you're saying there. Just one finally. What about the coalition with the Nats, with the National Party? Do you stick with that at this point, or is it worth also looking at breaking apart for a while?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, to be honest with you. Look, the National Party is a separate party in its own right, and I think there are various things that work together. I mean, I look at people like, a Perrin Davey or a Michael McCormack or a Darren Chester. Um, there's vast portions we agree with. I mean, I might sit in the Liberal Party, but I love Matt Canavan. He's fantastic. I find him a very pragmatic person to deal with. You have a good economic conversation about things as to why he thinks the way he does, and he's very rational. And I know media might have other opinions on that, but I find him to be a very rational person to deal with. So I don't have an issue with the National Party.
Hmm.
I think there's certain aspects coming out of an election where you've had some bruising three-corner contests, like in Bullwinkle, for instance, that, you know, people are feeling very bruised, and the Western Australian division of the National Party is not always difficult for even the National Party to manage. So it's an interesting thing that people always think that it's the Liberal Party and the National Party that is the coalition, but it's a country Liberal Party in the Northern Territory. It's a Liberal National Party in Queensland. It's the Liberal Party of New South Wales and the National Party of New South Wales. It's actually a lot of parties that make it a coalition, and these are very separate in their own rights and have very different constitutions and things. Um, but, if I'm going to be quoting former leaders, that's the beauty of the broad church.
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting discussion with you, Fiona Scott. You've, I think, sort of widened the lens as to what needs to be looked at this point for the Liberal Party after obviously a terrible result on Saturday. Really appreciate you joining us. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you.
And thanks for your company as well. If you have any thoughts on this conversation or ideas for the podcast, drop us a line, insiders@abc.net.au. We'll have much more on this on Sunday morning, and the drama's going on in, well, all of the parties at the moment, particularly in Labor. Ed Husic, who's been dropped from the cabinet, he will be my guest on Insiders. So I hope you can join us from the couch Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Time. Bye for now.